Okay, I have hit record, and you have hit play. So you know what that means, don't you? That means that this is Jay Brown Yoga Talks podcast, and my name is Jay Brown, and here we are again. That is, of course, if you're a returning listener. If you're new, welcome to you. How are you? Whoever you are. How was your week? No, really. I mean, how was it? I'm betting that there's a lot of you out there who didn't have such a great week. I say that because sometimes I feel like this shit's like in the stars or something, you know? Like, those of you listening who've been to a lot of yoga classes, who've taught a lot of yoga classes, have probably observed this, that when you gather with groups of people in a ritual way again and again, like almost every day, sometimes it feels like there's something going on. Like I say, in the stars, for lack of a better way to describe it. And it's almost like everybody's reacting to it. Everybody reacts differently, you know. We all have our own ways that we respond. But there does seem like there's something cosmic that we're all experiencing in our own ways. And I kind of like when I see that, because usually I'm feeling like shit, and I see other people feeling it too, and it makes me feel better, which is, you know, it makes me feel better because I feel like I'm not the only one. And you know, my week wasn't so great. My little girl got sick, which was a drag. You know, watching your 3-year-old puking all night is never fun. And then 2 things happened for me that were sucky. First was a practice thing. You know, in my personal practice these days, I'm ridiculously careful. Like, I'm never challenging my body anymore in my practice. It's almost as if I pushed my body so hard for so many years that now my practice is all about not going to my maximum. I don't think I'm ever going past maybe even like 60, maybe 70% of the full range that I could make my body do. Because if I do more than that, my body starts to not feel good. My pain levels go up. And I know that, but I was practicing a couple days ago, and I was totally doing the right practice for me on that day. But I was in this twist, and there was this like spot in my back. And for just a few moments, I don't know why, but I just decided to say, fuck it, and do it like I used to do it. And I just pushed into it, like full bore. And I love it. I love the feeling of that. I love the feeling of just all the way exertion right into that tight spot, or that spot that hurts. Just push it, right? And it felt great. And it was like old times for just a moment. And then even later that day, I was like, oh my God, there was so much movement. Like I put a bunch of movement into those areas that I haven't been putting movement in. And I was like, wow, my back hasn't felt this free so long. And then the next morning, and this has happened before, I'm lying in bed, you know, and I just turn, just like move my body a little bit. And then I hear this little crack right in that spot that I pushed in, and then my back is like, oh, it's like what they call out. You know, people used to say my back went out, and I never knew what they meant, but I know what they mean now. And I went, oh, and I knew it. It's like I can't do that anymore. It makes me think of what one of my teachers said to me, Kachi Ananda. She's been on this podcast. She said, when you make a commitment, Jay, the universe takes you more seriously. It's like I just can't get away with doing that to my body anymore. It's like instantly there was the blowback. So I managed to turn it around over the last couple of days, feel a little bit better. One thing that's helped, and this is the first time I'm ever saying this publicly, but I feel like I want to say it out loud. The last 2 months I've been taking CBD oil. And I don't take anything. I don't take any Advil or even any vitamins. I just try to eat well. But I had this conversation with somebody about CBD oil. They had said it really helped them. And I said, what the fuck, I want to try it. So I've been taking it for like 2 months. And I have to say, that shit helps, man. My inflammation and pain levels are way down. So, anyways, I felt like that was a whole thing that happened this week. And then the other thing that happened this week is that I called the tax guy because I got to get my 2017 tax returns together. And it kind of goes back to the episode I had with Roseanne Harvey recently, where I was being forced to look at, the hard numbers of my situation. And, I've been here in Pennsylvania now for, what's it now? Almost 7-8 months, I think. So, a better part of a year already, half of a year. So I have like something to compare a little bit to. And what I've had to admit to myself, now that I don't have the center anymore, which was just sort of like a big part of like my identity, when I really think about it, even back when I had the center, what I do as a teacher seems to be more valuable everywhere else other than where I live. And I think that explains why a lot of teachers at a certain point in their careers or whatever, I don't know if we call them careers, but at a certain point in their time as a teacher, they do start to step away from teaching the drop-in group classes. I was just talking with someone about this, and I was saying that, I want to keep teaching those classes because to me, that's where like people go to their yoga for the first time, where someone gets first exposed to yoga, their first class, that happens in one of those drop-in classes at their local center, So I feel like I want to teach classes there. I want to be part of that. But as teachers, those of you listening who are teachers know, you only got so much time. And when you get paid for your time and you got responsibilities, you got to prioritize stuff. And it's just crazy how much more money I make when I traveled somewhere, and how much more the experience of teaching is about people who want to engage and inquire, and less about me having to like get past a preconceived notion about yoga as a fitness thing or whatever, So it explains a lot to me, and I'm still going to keep my regular grouping classes, and I got a live stream subscription, which is allowing people all over the world to take those drop-in classes or observe them. I don't know if the people actually do it. Most of the people who have a live stream subscription, I think, actually do the class. But it's just a really crazy reality, which also goes to just our business models and the way that people will spend so much money on teacher training, but think that group classes should be so little, It's really an issue. And it's one that I'm going to be addressing going forward. I've got some big writing I'm doing, and also some podcast guests coming on. So anyways, all of that, those two things, the personal practice thing where I really have to question the things that I was taught back in the day and the way that I practiced in my early formative times, and the sort of realities of commodification in yoga. all of this goes very much to today's talk with Theo Wildcroft. Just the other day, she actually put out like this infograph explaining this term that she coined, post-lineage, which you hear a lot. This is sort of something that she's been working on, and I've been using the term I got from her. And she made these like 3 circles, and on one side was like the lineage traditions, and on the other side was like the complete commodification and like appropriation of yoga. And then like in the middle where they intersected was this post-lineage time. And I think that many of us, I would include myself, are kind of in that, where we're not subscribing to strict lineage anymore. We're exploring all kinds of things and deriving our practice from our own observations more than from an outside influence. And we're coming up against the money of trying to make a living at it, some of us, or even just the way that money flows through our culture. And that includes yoga culture. So, in any case, I had so much fun hanging out with Theo when I was in England. Those of you who were listening a few weeks back when I was coming to you from England, I spent, a good, 5 days or something with her? 4 or 5 days, I think. And it was so cool. And I got to hang out with her and see her teach in these very different contexts, to see where she's working in this post-lineage time. And I'm super psyched for you guys to hear it today. Before we do, let me drop my stuff. I got some gigs coming up. I'm going to be in Japan later this month, March 16th through 25th. I'm going to be in East Hartford, Connecticut, April 8th. I'm going to be in Fishkill, New York, April 14th. And I'm going to be in Falls Church, Virginia, April 27th through 29th. You can find out about those gigs and more. You can listen to the archives of this podcast and read my blog and find my online yoga video offerings at jbrownyoga.com. Please, if you would, support the podcast. Go to a blog or podcast page and make a direct donation, or go to Apple Podcasts and iTunes and write a review and give us some stars. It's very helpful, and we appreciate it. Okay, I am going to touch base with you on the other side about a few things, but let's go ahead and sit down with my good friend, Theo Wildcroft. Eventually you kind of forget they're there, usually.
Just work it out.
Yeah, you can hold it pretty close and talk into it for me.
And just check that the levels all work.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at.
Okay. So as long as I don't,
I'm
okay.
That's the thing. You want to kind of keep it close and
keep it with.
And talk into it,
Yes, talk to it.
Talk into it. Well, talk to me.
Yeah.
Don't talk to the microphone. Talk to me.
But talk.
Which is so ironic because I've been here for it's like my second full day here, and you and I have been talking nonstop.
Yes.
We could have recorded 3 podcasts, easily more, very long podcasts.
Yeah.
But now here we are, and the thing's on.
This is the real thing now.
No, not really. But see, that's what it's been fun for me, is that it's been happening several times this trip, because when I was in London too, like having conversations with people, and while I'm having them, I'm like, this would be the best podcast. But, I don't want to be making all my conversations with my friends podcasts, but the idea that my conversations on the podcast are not really any different in certain regards than the conversations I'm having off the podcast makes me feel really good. And also, I just want to take this moment, and it's publicly, I want to take this public moment to just express how amazing it's been for me to be hanging out with you.
Good. It's been lovely having you here. It's been really nice.
I mean, here's the reason why. Not just because I feel like we have more friendship together than we did before I came. But because, you know, I started this podcast 2.5 years ago while I was still in the bubble of having my center. Prior to having my center, I really felt like I knew what was going on out there. Like, I taught at like 6 or 7 different places. I taught at gyms. I taught at wellness centers. I taught I just felt like I knew what was going on. And then now, like, I'm back out, and I had the podcast happen. All these people, like, all over the world, sort of connecting with the podcast and sending me emails. And I feel like I don't really know what's going on. And my idea behind this year of traveling, I booked myself all this travel, was I want to see where yoga's happening, how yoga's happening.
Yeah.
So in this trip alone, okay, so I got to teach at Try Yoga, which is a thing in and of itself.
Yeah.
I recorded a podcast with Jonathan. I don't know whether this was going to post before. I think this one will post after that one, probably. So it'd be interesting. But the idea that I thought that was like this, like a Yoga Works. But it's not a Yoga Works. Like, there's differences between what Try Yoga is and what Yoga Works is, actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then I come hang out with you here in the English countryside, land of Stonehenge, and but Averby's much cooler, right?
Averby's always cool.
Yes, I've learned. But that out here, I get to see you teach in the town hall.
Yeah.
I get to see you work with those kids.
Yeah.
And then I get to hang out with you and talk to you about your thesis, where you're like, and you take me to these sites out in the fields. This underground circuit of yoga.
Yeah.
Most people don't even know exists, even who live in London.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So all of that is to just say that my mind is like full up. You know, I don't even know. So this is sort of like a moment for me to like process a little bit of what I've been seeing and hearing and pick your brain a little bit.
That's really cool. Because you've been having, and it's not just that, because you've been having conversations with people at, like, even at Try Yoga, you know, you were really open.
We should mention, like, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but as this is happening, there's a whole Ashtanga thing happening. So I had this whole Ashtanga conversation too.
Yeah. With some other people in London, which are really, really, really interesting and really good. And also all the people, of course, as is often the case, all the people on your workshop, most of them were yoga teachers, and all of their stories and their histories and stuff as well. You know, it's, I mean, I'm all for it. The more that we can talk to each other, the better. That's where the learning comes from, and that's where the evolution comes from, in my view, and that's where the humility comes from, that we're all just, you know, doing this thing. And I can't remember who it was. This is terrible for an academic not to remember a reference, but I can't remember who it was who told me that it was a particular Swami that they knew of who said, it's all just an excuse to be in the room together. And I love that, right?
Me too.
That's just, to have those conversations.
I'm also going to say that, you know, I had this opportunity to tack on another weekend after London, which meant that I had like this 3 days in between. And I was like, the only way I was like talking to my wife, and I was like, the only way I can really make this like work is if I can find a place to crash.
Yeah, totally.
Like if I don't have to pay for a hotel for those 3 days.
Yeah, sure.
And I was like, who could I ask? I mean, we didn't really know each other. You came on the podcast. I felt like we made some connection because we had a really good conversation. Then we like had Facebook exchanges or emails. But like on some gut level, I said to my wife, I was like, I think I could ask Theo Wildcroft. Just because like based on what I know of you and what you're about, I was like, if there's anybody I think it would be okay and be cool, I think it would be her. And that has totally proven to be true.
But also we had
because I just felt totally welcomed.
But it was a really lovely conversation. I think I was really appreciate the conversation we had was really perfect, even though it was just by email. Because also, like, I emailed you and I said, look, I really want to come on your weekend, and like, is there any chance of a discount? Because you know, and if not, I'm going to pay anyway. It was like, I am not expecting anything, and you were like, sure, we can make that happen. And then you were like, this is completely unrelated, but is there any way I can come to your house? But that is completely not dependent on you getting the discount for the course and all the rest of it. And I was like, of course, you know. So there was this, and I was saying to someone else, I think that there was this sense that it was absolutely not transactional, right? It was like
I was at risk.
Offering, right?
I realized I was at risk in the email, but I was like, in my heart, I knew it.
Yeah.
I was like, I generally would have been doing this for her whether or not I was asking her to crash at all. I was already planning to ask you to crash, but then you asked me if I could help you out. So I was like,
and that was really sweet because we don't have a lot of space, and the space that the space you're crashing in is.
I'm in your yoga room with the infamous yoga mat that the video on Facebook of you drawing on is here where we're recording on it.
And that's my desk. Like I have decamped the laptop upstairs into the bedroom, and my other half, Phil, he's quite a private guy, and he can be funny about who's allowed to sleep in his house and the whole thing. But it was the same thing. It was like, of course it's going to be okay. It's Jay. It'll be cool, and it'd be nice. And it's nice when that happens. It's good when that happens, I think. It's been good.
Do, but it comes back to what you said. It's like an excuse to be in the same room together.
Yeah.
And I guess I don't know. It's like, I like that the connections you have with somebody, even like an online, but when it's around purpose or something, like we share some same desires and purpose or something, and that seems to make it easier.
Yeah. And also, it also comes down, I think, to some really kind of esoteric, kind of profound stuff. I mean, on the workshop you were talking about, you blew everyone's minds with the whole dual, non-dual thing, right? But I got it because you're right. That difference is about how you approach the world, and it's also about how you approach relationships with other people of all kinds, right? How and I know because putting him on the spot, like when I decided to do a PhD, that's not what I did. I decided to enter into a relationship of a particular kind with my PhD supervisor, and his whole thing is animism, and his belief is it's all about relationship. Everything we do is about relationship. Right? It's all about how we interrelate between different beings of all kinds, not just humans, right? So that was that complete meeting of minds of this is what we do as human beings. We enter into deliberate relationship with other beings, and that those relationships are important, and that they take maintenance, and that they take but they also they take effort, but they also, it's that pure, what I would associate with a pure tantric, or at least a neo-tantric ideal, that everything can be learnt from that. Right? Everything can be learnt from being in a relationship, either with different parts of yourself or different parts of the world around you or different people. That's how we evolve, and that's how we change, right?
I think that's absolutely right. I couldn't agree more. I always say, like, it starts with the relationship between, like, you and your own body and your own breath.
Yeah.
And then often that's kind of the precedence for your relationship to everything else. But it goes to what you're saying is, like, it is about relationship. And just for anybody listening, what we're talking about is, like, over the weekend in London, I did, like, a series of workshops. And, for me, it's always interesting. Like, they ask you, you're going to come do a weekend worth of workshops. So that's going to be basically, 1, 2, 3, 5 sessions in total.
Yeah.
And they want different titles.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I had a lot of people who came to all of them.
Yes.
So I had one core group of people who were there the whole weekend, all 5 sessions.
Yeah.
But then we had for each one, like, random people who were dropping in. Sometimes people 1 or 2, sometimes people just 1, just to sort of check me out. So trying to balance that out is kind of hard. It means I have to have a little bit of redundancy. But there was enough people who were there for all 5 sessions that I was like, no, I'm going to get into it with these 5 people. And so the session that you're talking about is the session where I wanted to talk about yoga philosophy. And it was very intimidating for me to have you there. Anytime anyone who has a more scholarly understanding of the text, or who's read them more, or who's spent more time with them than me.
Which is, okay, so this is where I have to interrupt and point out that I am not a Sanskritist. I am not a historian. And the funny thing was, you were like, Theo can say this better. And then you were like, this beta, this beta, this beta. And I'm like, I can never remember which one's which. Like, your Sanskrit pronunciation is better. Like, your understanding of that stuff is probably better than mine, but I know what you mean.
I didn't know that.
Right?
I don't know what you know. All I know is you're a researcher. You work within academic circles.
Yes.
You cite you have references for everything. You're working on a PhD, and so for me, anybody who has that kind of relationship to yoga, I'm always a little bit not intimidated about. I'll teach anybody a breathing.
sure.
I can teach the breathing and moving that I understand. I know what I know and what I don't know.
Yeah.
So when I reach the edge of what I know, it comes to when I try to deal with any kind of texts or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I'm often good at, I think, trying to bring like larger, more difficult concepts down into a language that somebody could maybe get a hold of, because it's what I had to do to get a hold of it.
Yeah, totally.
So for me, that question of Purusha Prakriti, non-dual or dual, which is always sticky. It's just always a sticky conversation anytime I've ever tried to have it. It is defining, though.
Yeah,
like,
I think it is.
If you believe that you can be liberated, or that you need to be liberated, or that the goal of practice is an idea of an enlightenment that involves something that happens in your consciousness where you then have more than what you have now, or I don't even know the right words, as opposed to someone who doesn't take that view where you don't need to be liberated at all.
Yeah.
The purpose of your practice changes inherently because of that. And the choices that you make as a teacher are all based on that, whether it's conscious or unconscious. So that was my whole thing going in. But it's so interesting, again, anytime you start to point to like the lineages and the traditions and like you try to point back to where things come from, it just, it challenges what some people say about stuff. You run the risk of, again, like appropriation, all that stuff.
Right? It's hard, right?
So I thought it went pretty good, that session. I got some pretty good feedback. What I guess my question to you is, when you say that I blew everybody's minds bringing that in, what were you thinking of? Like, what did you observe happening? Because I can never know how that goes off to people. So from your outside of my perspective, what did you see happen in that session? Do you think we came to anything, or what do you think?
I think we do, but I think that the lens here for me, and the lens that I'm using at the moment, because it's the focus of my PhD, is always, how are these yoga teachers responding, and I'm fascinated by yoga teachers, and I've become more fascinated as a yoga teacher, but also as a researcher into this. And as this thing about these people, these figures that are both usually like profound practitioners in some way of what they do, that they teach, but they don't feel like experts themselves, but they feel like they should be experts. It's like the position we're all in, right? We're like,
we should mention that the majority of people in the workshop were teachers.
Yeah, they were.
Almost all of them. I mean, there was like a couple, one or two out of 40. Yeah. Who were listening, and that's interesting, because the people who weren't yoga teachers were like listening to the philosophy stuff, going, "Oh, this is kind of interesting." It did not. There was no investment there. They were, "This is kind of fun. Saturday afternoon. This is cool." With the yoga teachers, there's almost this look of like mild fear whenever you start having the conversation on people's faces, right? Because there's this: how am I going to live up to this? How am I going to live up to this deep and profound, incredible mystery that is yoga, that I kind of feel like I have touched with my fingertips, but don't have a damn clue how to share with anybody else, right? And everybody worries whether they're legit or they're a fraud.
And there's a bit, I can't share too much from the thesis, but there's a bit in the thesis where I'm really clear on this point. It is utterly unfair to reduce the knowledge of yoga teachers to what they teach. Like the most yoga teachers' knowledge and practice of yoga compared to what they teach or they get to teach in their 90-minute or 75-minute vinyasa class, that it's a tiny fraction of what they know, because you have to teach what lands, right? Like if people coming in thinking that yoga is just about a bit of a stretch and a lie down at the end, if you sit there for 90 minutes and do a talk on Purusha Prakriti, they're gonna leave,
lose
right?
Them within 10 minutes. They'll want their money back.
Right? Right? So you're doing this weird balancing act. All yoga teachers are doing this weird balancing act where we do 95% asana and pranayama and a little bit a little bit of relaxation, maybe a bit of a word at the end. We try and live in ways that adhere to the yamas and the yamas and those kinds of things as well. We read massive amounts of different kinds about different kinds of philosophy, and we're always worried that we're not doing enough standing between these two posts, right? Between these two poles of this incredible infinite mystery that we feel like we should just be able to discourse on for hour on end, but we don't, we've touched it with our fingertips and we don't know how to talk about it, right?
Because there's no words for it anyways.
It's insane, right? Compared to jumping up and down in a few sun salutations and how are your hamstrings today, right? And we live in between those 2 points. So anytime you take people into a place of you ask yoga teachers to, in a workshop, to talk about philosophy, I think there's that fear. And it's interesting that fear was in you as well, oh shit, am I going to live up to this? And as soon as you said that, I was sat there thinking, oh shit, now I have to live up to being a scholar. And even though I'm not a historian and I'm not a Sanskritist, and in theory I don't have to know any of this stuff, I also know that if Mark Singleton listened, he, people like Mark Singleton and Jason Birch and all those, the people that I know, I also don't want to screw up by putting things misquoting
so
them.
There you go. Same for you. If you were trying to teach and they were in your workshop.
Yeah. And I'll tell you this, and this slightly puts this is slightly behind the kind of curtains thing, but it was a moment that was really beautiful for me, and I hope he doesn't mind me sharing it. But I was at conference last summer. Jason Birch was giving a paper, and I was hanging out with Jacqueline, and he was like, I just need to go and prepare for my paper. And Jacqueline and I were talking about it, and she was like, oh, he needs to practice the pronunciation of the Sanskrit. And I said, well, how does Jason Birch need to practice the pronunciation? And she's like, if you're a Sanskritist at this level and you pronounce something wrong in a conference paper, that's it, your cred's gone. Right? So he's practicing his Sanskrit pronunciation and just to make sure he doesn't fluff the words by accident, And it's how interesting is it that we're all trying to live up
to something,
to this mystery, right?
To this
being
authentic,
thing.
or being able to back it up.
Yeah.
For me, I said this to you earlier. It's like the gall that I have to travel to London and show up, sit in front of 40 people and conduct. It's almost like because of that, I feel like I have to make those kind of disclaimers or whatever. Well,
as you know, I'm one of many people who've been asked to feed back on a little document that Yoga Alliance are putting together. Mm-hmm. And as far as I'm concerned, it's a really small piece of work. I'm one of a large number of people. I don't get to write the document. They just want to send it to me, and they're going to pay me for 5 hours of work of looking over it and telling them what I think. That is it. That's the beginning and the end of my job, as far as I'm concerned. And they want lots of different perspectives, and they think I have something to add, and that's cool. And this has gathered some criticism in some quarters, and not least, I got trolled by various people basically saying, who the hell are you that people want to listen to you anyway? And my response is, I have the same question.
I have no idea.
I have no idea, but they apparently thought that my thoughts would be useful, and that's it. Right? I have no arrogance about my position here. Right?
I think there's a bit of there's people, if you put yourself out and you make comments on people's blogs and you offer some constructive something to the conversation. Yeah. There's people hungry for it out there, I think, and that's why we sort of you find the others, as they say.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I guess the majority of people, I did get pretty good feedback for that philosophy workshop.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
There was one or two people, one person in particular. Well, one person was that weird Trump thing that happened.
How dare you?
So bizarre, though. I made one little... We didn't even talk about politics at all.
No.
I made one comment of things are really messed up in my country right now.
Yeah, that was pretty much it.
And someone else said Donald Trump, but not me.
Yeah, and we moved the conversation on immediately.
Moved the conversation right away. And still I got an email from someone telling me I had Trump derangement syndrome, and she didn't think it was appropriate that I brought politics into the workshop,
Yeah.
But it was so ironic that she was talking about all the college kids who get triggered. And then that's exactly what happened with her.
Yeah.
She got triggered by this one thing. And I was like, I emailed her back. I said, after in the 90 minutes that we talked about Purusha, Prakriti, and non-duality and duality, I made this one little comment,
Yeah.
But the only other feedback that I got that wasn't so positive is one woman in particular felt that, almost that kind of argument you get, like you're over-analyzing it. Like all yoga is good yoga. It doesn't matter whether you're non-dual or dual. And she was basically saying, it's just what your intention is. Like she specifically wrote, it's just about your intention. And I felt like what I got from that is that she had learned certain things about yoga philosophy or certain what I believe were probably classical sort of dualistic ideas about yoga philosophy. And what I was saying about non-duality, as I said in that workshop, it does fundamentally call into question.
It does, but also I think it's more than that. I think it's this particularly, what for me is a particularly problematic combination of the non-dualism which comes out of this particular system, particular way of thinking, that then gets mashed up with this prosperity doctrine. And actually, it's a very Christian kind of idea.
Harish Wallace talked about this when he was on the podcast. Right? He said that the same thing is this mishmash of these two things that don't actually go together.
They don't go together. And to my knowledge, again, not being a Sanskritist, but to my knowledge, there's not nowhere near as much discussion of kind of intention as there is discussion of discernment. Like that is a word I would like yoga teachers to use more often. Like, where's your viveka? Like, never mind your intention. Where's your viveka? Where's your discernment? Because and people say, oh no, judging in yoga. Yoga is all about judgment. It's all about making judgments. Like, that's what life is. And it's not about saying this isn't yoga, that is yoga, etc., etc. I don't know if anyone is. I think very few people have the arrogance or the position to be able to say that. But what you can say is, this is not my yoga. This isn't what resonates with me. This isn't work with me. Right?
You can totally disagree.
Yeah. Like, I haven't, like, we were talking earlier about the whole beer yoga, goat yoga, these kinds of things. Like, you want to do yoga that way, that's fine. We want to have a discussion about what the intention of that yoga is, what you're trying to do with that yoga, whether it serves that. Then we have a more interesting discussion. If your intention is to, encourage people into a lifestyle that has fewer and fewer stimulants in it, then beer yoga is probably a bad plan. Right?
Yeah.
If I'm quite fond of the idea of the goat yoga. It's always goat yoga and cat yoga, and I love both. You're I have cool no issues with that at all. And particularly because, for me, my personal philosophy, again, is all around relationship. And that relationship is to a more than human world. So therefore, for me, in the same way as I will practice underneath particular trees, because it's amazing to hang out with those trees, I can see the point of hanging out with particular animals. Now, does that mean that your average bouncing up and down with a goat on your back yoga is a particularly profound experience? I don't know, but I can see how, I'm not going to rule it out for other people. You know what I mean?
Right.
Even if it doesn't work for me, I want to know, what is it you're trying to achieve here? It's Peter Blackaby's favorite phrase. What are you trying to achieve? I
like that a lot. And I would also say, is I'm always very clear in all these workshops, nobody has to believe anything that I say. I invite people to disagree with me. That one gentleman was in the group and he was disagreeing, or not disagreeing, but challenging.
Yeah.
And I love that.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting. The only time that Jenny, the woman who brought me to try yoga and hired me and then came to see how the workshop, the only time that she was in the room, she was there for maybe 15 minutes out of the whole weekend, was when that guy decided to totally challenge me on something,
That's probably
that I couldn't
good, right?
speak to. He wanted to talk anatomy, and I couldn't talk to him about the specifics of what happens in your intercostal muscles when you take the inhale. That's not what I know.
Yeah.
Which is basically what I said to him, and then brought it back to the points that we were talking about.
Yeah.
And fortunately, I handled it. And so Jenny, later complimented me on how I handled. She's like, that's risky, because she said most teachers don't open it up like that. Most teachers keep a tighter kind of control
over the discussion,
over what the discourse that's going on in the class. To really open it up and really let people invite people, because a lot of times people don't feel comfortable, but I do whatever I can. And so for me, I like it. To me, if someone wants to challenge what I'm trying to teach, that automatically means I have to like become a better teacher or something. Like, I have to really be able to back it up.
Yeah.
Or I have to demonstrate what I teach, which is the humility to know that I don't know.
Yeah, and be honest about that.
And be honest about that, and let that example be the teaching.
Yeah.
Which is what I had to do because I didn't know how to answer his question.
Yeah.
But
I think the knowledge, the breadth of knowledge that encompasses yoga now is so huge. I think people are starting to really, not everyone, but there's a joy now in specialization, because you can go really deep into the anatomy side of things. You can be really deep in the philosophy side of things. You can be really deep into different ways of doing things. Can you be all things to all people? Probably not. You can't do it. So I think there's value in knowing who you are as a yoga teacher and what you want to do. And I'm very clear. I think possibly because my specialisms are a little bit weird.
Yeah.
In that, because there's the research side of things, and then there's the stuff particularly the stuff I do with the kids, which is in a lot of ways is also what I'm known for. And then there's the yoga nidra stuff, and none of those three things overlap in any way, shape, or form, really. So they're very different ways.
They overlap through you.
Yeah.
Well, let's get to that.
Okay.
So, because that's the one example. That's the initial example that I came to London for. I got invited by Tri Yoga to come teach those workshops.
Yeah.
Which was a totally positive experience, I got to say. I didn't know what I was getting into. And as I will talk about when I post my Jonathan Satin episode, I have no idea how I would ever get a gig at Yoga Works. There's a central office that the booking goes through. I don't even know how you would do it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of in-house things because you have people they have teachers on staff who, you know what I mean? So that Tri Yoga did on an interpersonal level send their manager, their representative to Brooklyn. I mean, she was in town for, I think, a conference, but she showed up and came to my class and took me out to lunch, and I got vetted. Right? I got vetted.
Yeah.
And I believe that I got hired because of the relationship
yes.
that was happening there. And then even to the extent that when I got there, and it's partly because of the podcast, which is why I love the podcast, I got to then have actual relationship with the owner of Tri Yoga, which I don't know that all the yoga teachers who teach at Tri Yoga get to do. Also.
I'm sure they don't.
Well, I got to sit in the room and ask that guy, why did you open Tri Yoga? Why do you open so many of them? You know what I mean? I had a real conversation with the big boss.
Yeah.
So I actually feel like an interpersonal connection and supported. They want me to come back, and you know what I mean?
Which is cool.
It is cool.
Yeah.
But it's big. They're big size. And when you walked in the door, there was all those shoes there, and it was like this kind of a scene. That cafe was definitely a scene.
There's definitely
it was like a little bit cliquey, but I was comfortable in that scene personally, but I don't know that everybody would be.
Yeah.
So that was like what I kind of came. But then, as we also discussed, by just the quirk of my own intuition, I decided to ask if I could stay with you. I come out with you. First thing is, we have the town hall class.
Village hall.
Village hall.
Not
town hall. Village hall.
It's too tiny to be town hall.
It's too...
It's like, how many people do you reckon you could fit in that room? Because I reckon I could maybe get 10 if I really tried.
You put everybody in the round.
I know.
If you made them in rows,
I know.
I think you could probably get 8 to 10 in there easy. Yeah, but still, what was incredible though is we got there, the door was open.
I love that. I have to say, it's very different. There are there's other village halls. All village halls are wonderful, obviously, because they're all run by volunteers. This is the thing you have to realize. They're all run by volunteers, so therefore it's what the volunteers are able to do. So there's other halls I turn up at, and it's freezing cold and it's dark, and I have to get in and so on and so forth. I turn up at the railed one, and there's kind of retired people who live just around the corner who go in and sweep the place and turn the heating on and unlock the doors and just leave me to it, and and check in with me occasionally, make sure it's okay, and it's just gorgeous. So I love it.
How did that happen? Was that hard to make? Because we're in the English countryside, as I said, the stone circles, Neolithic monuments, and wide open fields.
Yeah.
How do you make a little class happen at a village hall?
Yeah. Well, the first thing you do is you ring all the village halls in your area, and you'll find one of three things. Either they will already have a yoga teacher there. If they have my personal feeling, and it's just my personal feeling, if they already have a yoga class there, I don't want to compete with that teacher. Right. I'm going to split students with somebody. I don't feel that's fair personally. Not everyone's that fair necessarily with me. But that was a rule I decided, and I think a lot of people do stick to that as well. Because when I first started out, if I found there was a yoga teacher, I'd ask them, how do you feel about me starting a class? And they would say, please don't. Like, please don't. Because everyone's running on tiny margins, right?
Yeah, that's a small group there.
It's a tiny little
group. It's a village.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a Wednesday morning, you know what I mean? It's yeah. So we said it's all B&B owners because they can get there. They've got the guests out the door and they can get to a 10:30 class.
Interesting.
So then that's one answer is if they've already got a yoga class, and a lot already do. They'll have little yoga teachers, teaching in village halls all over the country and probably all over the world in different ways. So then that's a no. Secondly, every so often you'll get a kind of a bit of an uncomfortable silence. And that's when there's a close link between the venue and the local church. And it's one of those churches that doesn't like having not just yoga, but also yoga and Tai Chi, things like that. And then they can be a little funny. And what's interesting is what I find tends to happen is you get apology. So you don't get, don't darken my door, Satan, right? You don't get that. What you get is, I'm really sorry, but our local vicar doesn't think this is a good idea. And in one case, the guy, like before I even said anything, because I'm generally, look, if you don't want it, that's fine. I understand. It's your venue. It's your thing. That's absolutely fine. And one guy I was speaking to was like, it's just ridiculous. I don't understand why. It's completely stupid. And I'm really, really sorry. And, the whole thing. And I thought I was really sweet. So every so often you get that. But usually, like, local people are really embarrassed about that. So there's one village hall I teach in. Sometimes it's used for other things on the same night. Like twice a year, it has plays on, right? And there's always a thing where they go, oh, well, for that night, we could put you in this other venue. And then they look at each other and go, oh, no, we can't, can we? Because they won't have yoga. But nobody will say why. It's like, oh, yeah, we can't do that kind of. So there's this kind of embarrassment, which is interesting because it doesn't make me feel excluded. It feels like these weird people won't let you do this thing, and that it's them that's weird, not you.
Oh, the person you're talking to is totally cool with it.
Totally. Usually, the person you're talking to is really cool.
Yeah,
would be fine.
They'd be happy. They want to come.
There'd be no problem at all. So that's really sweet. Or the third thing is, then you have to work out the schedule, because then it's in terms of what they are, and on the basis that they do it. So some of them are run essentially to make money for the village. So it's a tricky thing with yoga teachers because technically we're commercial. But you can't charge us commercial rents. We don't make enough money. So there are places that I you can't. It just doesn't work. And then you just start the class up. And in my experience, it takes probably honestly 2 years for it to settle.
You got to show up.
You got to keep showing up. You got to keep paying the rent.
And you got to relate. See, because that's what I'm getting at. Because we started, and we were talking about relationship. And I was watching what happened in that village hall class that I practiced in.
It was nice to have you.
It was wonderful.
Yeah.
But it was so much what I identify as the most important part of the whole darn thing. Is just that they come in and you say hi, and you just, there's excuse to be in the same room together.
Yeah.
And then actually what you did with them, or what you did with us, I was one of them, I shouldn't see them, was not at all like, it wasn't dumbed down at all. I don't know how to say it any other way. Like you challenged us to inquire in a way that I don't know that all the yoga teachers who came to my workshops would have been on board for or something.
Yeah, and I think they know that. Because I have this little. I think they quite, that group in particular, they quite like it.
Because none of them were like experienced practitioners necessarily. I mean, they might have been practicing for, but they weren't yoga teachers or trained.
No, and a lot of them are. Like I said, there's the one. There's one that's recovering from heart surgery. There's one that's recovering from knee surgery. There's one that's got recurring vertigo. You know what I mean? A lot of them are older, or so that they're not. it's that interesting thing where we always say it's not about your physical, it's not about your ability to do physical poses, right? And those kind of groups really epitomize that, because they're people who have lives and have had lives and have shit to do, right? Yes. They're not at home practicing as to procrastinate. Like they got stuff to do, and then on a Wednesday morning they come and hang out. Right. They're hard work because they don't take me too seriously.
Yeah, it was fun. It was a fun group. Nobody had anybody talking, and it was. I love that stuff.
Yeah. But in return, they also, I think, there's a little bit of prestige there. That in their little Wednesday morning village hall yoga class, like they've got a PhD researcher coming. Like they
and
know.
I go to yoga sometimes, and if you're in a group of people that aren't into yoga, you get to be the one who does yoga.
Yeah. And I love that they're all people who don't have, what other people might think are conventional yoga bodies or conventional yoga kind of lifestyles. But for me, that's not a reason not to challenge them in terms of their awareness of their bodies, in terms of what they're doing, in terms of the subtleties of things that are going on, all of those things. I don't believe in this, let's get the forms right and then let's teach the other shit afterwards.
Or placate to the fitness some.
Yeah.
People want it to be like more of like a workout thing, and you can make a class that still challenges them to. I try to ride that line of we move a fair amount more than we did even in your class in certain ways.
Yeah.
But I'm also leaving it open for you to not move. Yeah. But at the same time, you similar to someone like Amy Matthews, you hold a stronger line or something like that to me, which I really appreciate. Even in including that you used consent cards and you make your own consent cards, which I also think is cool.
Yeah.
But I have to say, I've never been in a class that used consent cards before. So yours is the first class I've ever been to.
In a village hall in Round.
In a village hall in the English countryside.
Got consent cards.
And you did it cool too, because you didn't walk around and put one on each person's mat. You just had this thing in this pouch and we just threw it.
Because
you threw it to them, they took one out, they threw it to the next one, we threw it around to each other.
Yeah.
And what really got me is the woman next to me chose not.
She chose
There was
no.
one woman who chose snow. And I was like, wow. I was like, why would she choose snow? And then I thought, oh, that's the fucking reason why you use the dumb consent cards, asshole.
Because you don't need to know.
Because you don't need to know and you don't know.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you. I'll
and you didn't touch anybody.
Yeah. I know I didn't even touch
You didn't even touch anybody, even though you used the consent cards.
Yeah. And sometimes I will.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you why she used it. And it's really simple because it's always the answer. The reason why she used no on her consent cards is because it made her feel safer. And that is always the reason. No matter what the reason might be for somebody not wanting to be touched, the reason why she flips that consent card over is because flipping it over allows her to feel safer and more comfortable in the class. And that's the only reason I need to know. That's always the reason.
Yeah.
Right?
Very
so if it makes you
and
feel
she
safer
might
and
come
more
next week and not turn it.
She might. So far, it's always been on the no. She's a fairly new student, so I'm like, she's no, and I'm like, that's cool. When you're ready,
do you think that because this is totally conjecture? I don't even know why I'm asking. Is that because she's been to a yoga class where someone touched her and she didn't want them to? We don't know. She just doesn't want to be touched.
Yeah. And I like that I don't have to know.
Yeah.
And I like that we don't have to have that conversation, but I can allow her to do what she needs to do to make her feel safe. But it's funny when you talk about just throwing them around, because of course this group, they've been using those for ages. She's fairly new, but the rest of the class. So if there's new students in, what will happen is, it's often, obviously I will explain, but quite often I'm busy doing sign-in and doing other things. So
I just got it. I watched it. I was like, this is great. Throw me the pouch.
But if you're new and they know, if they don't, what I will also see happening is those established students, they'll tell you.
They'll explain.
They'll go, okay, this is what you do. This is how we do it.
You don't even have to do it.
I don't have to do it because they are active participants in the culture of that class. Right?
Yeah. Active participants in the culture of that practice space.
Yes, they are. It's their practice. Right? And we agree that this is a good thing that we are doing together. Right? That's what works. And they will do all sorts of fun things. So they will challenge me in weird ways. So I told you about the sign-in thing. So I have this sign-in sheet, and you sign it, and by signing it, you've read the thing at the top that says, I have let Theo know anything she needs to know in terms of issues, right? And the sods will sign in for each other, right? Which I love.
I mean,
that
I gotta
they break
admit, I
those
signed
rules.
it and I didn't read the thing at the top.
No.
I just thought you needed to know how many people were in class.
Yeah.
I didn't even see that there was a thing at the top. Just to know, like, I
But
didn't
they
even
know,
read it.
they all know that's why it's there, and they'll still sign in for each other. Right?
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
love that they can break the rules because I will put my protocols down, but in the end, it's their class, right?
Yeah.
So some of them have started doing this very silly thing with the consent chips,
Yeah.
where on some days what they'll do is they'll drop it from a height and see which way it lands.
They'll let the fates decide.
And let the fate decides whether they're doing adjustments or not.
But is that really consenting? I guess it doesn't really matter.
It's their thing.
Fun.
Exactly. And I like that they can engage in that, right? Because that's how things evolve. Because every so often in that kind of fun, something will come out that will spark a change or an evolution in what I'm doing as a result, because it will make me think about something interesting. So, the more you can get back from your students, always as a teacher, the better, right?
Yeah, I'm referencing back though, because that idea of participation in the culture of the practice, because there's a lot of partition in the culture of tri-yoga practice, tri-yoga in the same way, but that culture was different.
Yeah.
The yoga center culture was definitely is a different culture than the village hall culture.
Yeah, and every yoga space that you set up will have its own culture, even different village classes. Like I have a Monday night class and I have a Wednesday morning class, 2 different villages, and they're different times of day, very different constituencies, different sizes of classes, different kind of, the Wednesday morning is more regular, because if you can make it on a Wednesday morning, you can make it on a Wednesday morning.
Yeah, that becomes part of your schedule.
That's the thing. Monday night is like, can I fit it in? Have the kids got a rehearsal tonight? So inherently it's that little bit more. People try to be regular. It's not that people are treating it casually, but I get a lot more of the apology texts going, things have gone terribly wrong. I'm not going to get there tonight. So even between those 2 classes, the culture is different.
Yeah.
Right? And then the culture at Canons, at the center is a whole other practice culture again, right?
That's right. So let's go there. So the next, later that day.
Yeah, Wednesday's teaching day. Yeah.
We go to, what's it called? Canon, you said?
Canon's house.
Canon's house.
Yeah.
And that is a place for children with special needs. And you say they spend like 10 days there or something like that?
No, they often have an allocation of 10 days per year.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're often just there overnight. Some of it will be for a few days. It's a respite center. So the pure idea is that it's a space where they can be away from home. So if you have a child who has technically profound and multiple, that's the definition. So if it's a profound and multiple needs this child has, and you want to go away for the weekend with your partner, or you just.
If you are hearing this message, then you're listening to the free version of J. Brown Yoga Talks. To hear the rest of our conversation, please subscribe to Podcast Premium at jbrownyoga.com/premium.